Hi, my name is Awesome Aguilera, and welcome to WEYT, the show where I find interesting people just like you and discover what's going on between their ears. Now, let's get to know one another. Here we are, another episode of WEYT. Awesome Aguilera here with you. And today's mantra is, doubt kills more dreams than failure ever will. So work on your relationship with failure because it may be helping you become better than you think. Failure is not the end. It's just the stepping stone towards success. And here today I have Chantale Milord, who is a life coach. And my relationship with Chantale is we've actually never even met. But we had a conversation because we met through a networking group. And that discussion was so good, I was like, you know what, you need to be on the show. So here is Chantale. So Chantale, tell us a little bit more about who you are and how you've gotten where you've gotten.
Well, thank you so much, Flip, for having me on this show. It is truly an honor to be a part of your community. Thank you again. So, my name is Chantale Milord, and I am an entrepreneur life coach. I currently have two educational facilities, one in Miami-Dade County and one in Broward County. I am also an individual and business life coach where I assist individuals in the process of eradicating any fears, as you mentioned, fear earlier, which I think often fear is the grim reaper of all good and positive life currents. And so to be able to transmute from hurtful, painful, fearful situation and transmute those into positive currents that help one transform their entire mind and life, which would allow for a tranquil, prosperous journey.
And what about your journey has caused you to want to do all of this?
Oh my God, I don't know if we have enough time to delve into that. I would say the most important thing about my journey that caused me to now be committed to the cause of helping others is the idea how we live, not knowing that. I would say it like this, and most people would say, okay, that's kind of like a mind twister, right? When you don't know what you don't know, that you don't know what you don't know, that you don't know what you don't know. So I've lived my entire life living a life and suffering, not knowing that I was even suffering, not knowing that I was the cause of my suffering, that my action, my lack of the wisdom, knowledge that I needed to survive this life was the cause of my suffering. When I discovered, and for a very long time, I was looking for Superman. I was like, I was for sure that someone, somewhere was going to come and rescue me. And decades after decades have passed by, and I'm like, okay, so Superman isn't here. You know, God, I'm here waiting still. And so I discovered that if it was up to anyone to shift my life, it was totally up to me to do. So I began to do some studies. I did some internal evaluation, and I discovered that I was practically sleepwalking throughout life and not knowing that I was sleepwalking. And so I made a personal decision to reinvent myself, to cultivate myself in a way that is conducive to health, wealth, vitality, prosperity, also posterity for my children or the generation after me. So for that reason, I am committed because oftentimes we want a life, we want a relationship, we want value, but we are unaware that we are unaware that we are unaware that we are unaware.
Yeah, for sure. My story is very similar to yours. Like I think of my early 20s and there was so much non-awareness. And to your point, I wasn't even aware that I was not aware. So everything you're saying is resonating, very much with me. And one of the things I wanted to bring up, it sounds to me like you took on, I don't want to call it a burden, that's the wrong word, but you really grabbed on to the concept of responsibility.
Absolutely.
And you became your own super person.
That's right.
And do you feel when you become your own super person, that then it opens up the door for other super people to surround themselves around you, right? Because, you know, like if you remember, I don't know what kind of cartoons you were watching when you were little, but I remember when I was little, you had the super friends. So yeah, they all would come do their things individually, but they would come together when things got really rough to help each other out. So do you think that in you becoming your own super person, you have finally found some other super people around you?
That's why you on this line with me. What you think about that? I think we attract all conditions into our lives, whether they're happy conditions or whether they're not so happy condition, because as a man thinketh, as I perceive life to be, it is so for me. And for a long time, I had been making the wrong law for myself. Because, see, outside of you and I, the law exists. Whether or not we want to come subject to the law, yeah, that's something else. So the law of reaping and sowing, the law of reciprocity, the law of growth, the law of every law had existed before I realized that they existed. And my lack of not knowing that the law existed did not override the consequences of my failure to effectively engage that law. And so I truly believe at the time when I was unaware that I had a lot of unaware people, and those people fed the wrong ego, that fed my weaknesses because they wanted me to remain in that specific place with them. As you know, misery loves what? Company. And so
but so
as
does
I
happiness.
exactly. So as I began to evolve, I made a decision. I became intolerant, that there are certain things that I realized that I didn't have to take. There are certain relationships that I realized that I didn't have to engage. That life, I was now living life on my own term. And as a result, I attracted all the positive current, all the positive people, including yourself and others who are helping me along the journey, as well as me helping them. Because it's a two-way street. You know, you give and you get and you give. So I am really grateful for that transition, because I do now magnetize all the right folks, I would say, into my life. So I'm very happy about that.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing about, you know, some of your journey with us. But now let's transition to the question that everybody comes to this show to answer. And that is, what is engaging your thoughts?
What is engaging my thoughts? It is the ability to live in instant to instant, moment by moment, conscious awareness. I want to be the one, knowing that I am the one engaging life.
Yeah.
Therefore, life is not engaging me and giving me what it thinks I deserve, but rather that I engage it and engage it in such a careful manner, circumspectly, that I can submit to the law for myself and get the return on my investment emotionally.
And what you're saying is, it's easy to say, right? Like, oh, who doesn't want to live in the moment?
Right.
But living in the moment is a very difficult thing to do, because, you know, you tell me your experience, but when you really start to pay attention to living in the moment, you realize how much of your thoughts you have absolutely no control over. Absolutely. Until you start practicing awareness and you realize, wow, I had just had 50 thoughts that I don't even know where they came from. I didn't control them. They came into my head and I let them control me, instead of saying, oh, you know, when you practice something like presence and being in the moment, it's like, oh, I have this thought. And you notice it. And then you're like, do I even want to engage in this thought? Is this something I want my brain to be practicing?
Absolutely.
And how often can you do that? So do you have any examples of maybe some time where, you know, you noticed that you were doing that and how that affected you?
I think I have decided to engage life in a manner. I feel like life is somewhat like a story, right? And or a movie, or that play that we like, that Shakespeare. And for a long time, I've lived outside of that screen, watching my life So mindfulness is almost like now you taking a leading role. And part of that leading role is becoming responsible. And that responsibility calls not for every other day or every other month, but it's a moment to moment. And the painful part about that, like you say, it's hard, it's not easy. The painful part about that is being able to call yourself out on your foul.
Yeah.
Be able to, because nobody else know what you're thinking. So it behooves me to be able to check my thoughts, to be able to, okay, I hear you coming. I've had thoughts come in from things that I did when I was 16, because that's what the ego does. It wants to rule, it wants to reign, it wants to control. And I've lived so long allowing it to have its free reign that now, as the leading actor, as the leading player of my life, I assume that responsibility. And I engage it sometimes, and sometimes I allow it to be so, and I capture my thoughts back. And see, we often refer to the past for reference or the future for salvation. When you're in the present, neither one of those exists. So right now is what I'm doing. I tell you, as crazy as this may sound, I'm coming down my stairs. I'm like, okay, I'm Chantale and I'm coming down my stairs,
Yeah.
and that's the only thing that I'm doing. I am not projecting the kitchen or that sandwich that I want. I am simply walking down the stairs. And see, because most often we're already in the kitchen. We already see the eggs, we already see the
Yeah.
milk, and you forgot that you just went through the stairs. And sometimes through that process, we suffer from the law of accident because we're not present to them stairs, and there could potentially be danger, a toy or something that can cause a fall that was not necessary because I wasn't there. So it takes practice, but when you identify that you're the only person that is responsible for your life directly or indirectly, then it behooves me to take a personal responsibility on how I engage my life moment by moment.
Awesome here. The way you're putting it all together is amazing. And to echo your point, something that I heard once, and now that I've taken it inside of me, and kind of to your point of going down the steps, is that you want to be where your feet are.
Yes,
Be
that's
where
it.
your feet are. And right now, the feet are going down the stairs, left, right, left, right. And
Exactly.
me as the holistic coach with the personal training and movement and all that, how about if you're going down those stairs and you feel, oh, I feel a little tweak in my step, because you're actually paying attention. And if you feel the tweak when it's small, you can do something about it. Where if you don't pay attention and you keep on and you're like, my knee kind of hurt when I was doing the stair today, but you just keep going because you're thinking about the sandwich in the kitchen, and that little tweak and that pain that's growing is your body telling you, hey, be aware, be here, because something's going on right here.
My Lord, that's awesome.
So another thing I wanted to go into was, you brought up the ego. And I want to break the ego apart a little bit, because the ego is there evolutionarily for a reason. To your point, if you let it take control and you have no mindfulness over it, it's going to take you through some unnecessary roller coasters.
Absolutely.
Tell me what you think of the idea that you do need to have enough ego to have self-respect.
I would say I have gotten that. I got a word, a statement from a Zen master, Lao Tzu.
Lao Tzu, yeah.
Yeah, where he said, "Doing, not doing. It's Wa Wu Wei." Right. So I've
The Tao
learned
Te Ching.
exactly. That's about one of my favorite books. I've just learned that we interpret life and the events of life that happens to us totally differently. The ego to someone else may be something completely different from how I interpret it. I think the ego generates from when we were small, events happen to us that we don't like. I would probably put it in this format, right? Something happened to a person at 9 years old, and that situation devastated them in their own interpretation. As a result, they make up a self now that this will never happen to me again. So in order for that to never happen to them again, they have to become someone other than who that event
happened to.
So I think oftentimes the ego is born that way, and then the ego keeps driving that 9-year-old life.
Yeah.
Now that 9-year-old becomes a 20-year-old, a 30-year-old that is still triggered by 9-year-old events, that is being governed by that 9-year-old ego, robbing them of the opportunity to be in the present here and now, not being able to identify that that event was just an event. It was a life situation and not their lives. In that instance, we need to identify with the ego and eradicate it in some aspect. Ego control takes us away from the ability to be in the present moment awareness. Because if it is, I'm in a relationship and I'm in an argument, my ego wants to be right, because to be wrong is what? To die. Yep. So I'm going to do everything in my power to defend my position and make my partner wrong so that I can be right. So as a result, it's just really about, to each person it is. I have my thought on what the ego can be, someone else's thought, and I think everyone respectfully have their own evolution process. So that's the ego for me.
So when you say to be wrong is to die, is there some sort of way that we can reconcile that maybe sometimes there are little parts of us that need to die? So that just like a forest, when there's a forest fire, that part of the forest needed to die so that the new forest could come up and grow, even better.
I would certainly agree to that. I think every day, and that would probably take us to another part, there are things about us that are rigid, characteristic we've developed as a result of what happened to us, that those part of us certainly need to die. But when I speak of to die, to be wrong is to die. So a person will continue to defend that wrong, even knowing that they're wrong, to the point now they begin to believe they're wrong as right, which now usher a state of illusion or delusion. To your point, I think we have to look for ways to die, calcinate the ego every day in every way, because we're tripping over our emotions, we're tripping over our actions, and we're tripping over, you have people who can't live a happy relationship because they have a set belief that have not served them, but they refuse to hold on to them. And so to let go of that for them is death, because they don't know anything different. So it's not a bad death, it's actually a good death, if they would just simply allow it to happen.
It sounds to me, to wrap everything you set up into a nice little book, we need to tell people to stop tripping.
Stop tripping. I like that. Stop tripping.
I want to expand a little more on the relationships part of this. Be them business relationships with, obviously it starts with yourself, with your romantic, with your family. Ever since you've made this transition of being more where your feet are, what has that done for the relationships in your life?
Man, that's a really nice one. Very good question. For a very long time, it's almost as if I've played life backwards, that I didn't even know how to even engage truly, how to even give myself truly in a relationship. So I think in the past, I've engaged relationship from a surface, artificial level, like most people do, but they don't know that they're doing it that way. So, it doesn't resonate or relate to them. It wasn't until recently, a few years ago, 4 to 5 years ago, that I've decided to engage life totally different, including how I raise my own children, how I relate to my children, how I relate in business, even my romantic relationship. I made a decision to structure the way that I would engage my relationship. And I promise you, I have never, ever lived life in paradise, not on paradise, but in paradise, as I am living now with my partner. There's no need for an argument because we have systems in place, but we do check and balance. We check on our emotions. I have no need to be wrong, to be right and make him wrong, because I look at him and value him from a standpoint where he is I in reverse and vice versa. I am him in reverse. And there is no position for me to defend because I am now vulnerable, where in the past, I'm strong. I don't want you to think that so there is no facade. I've taken down the walls. I have allowed myself to be present to him. And it's not, from what I want from the relationship only, but it's what we both need to have the relationship work. And I also let go of the codependency to need to have my life have meaning, and that he would need to bring that meaning for me. So to sum it up for the women, or even for the men, right? I'm a Christmas tree, right? Regardless, that tree is a tree. Anything that comes to it is an ornament. It makes it look good, but that tree is planted. It has its foot on the ground, and it has to maintain that poise. And then as that tree, you bring life to everything and everyone that comes in contact with you. So for me, I make my king feel like he is the best thing that ever happened to life, and that there is no need for me to strip him of his power to get my point across, or to even be able to get him to listen to me. We established those structures from the beginning. I express what I feel, what I need, what I want. So, and I express it in a way that I'm clear, that he understands me, and I'm not throwing a tantrum. It is me speaking from my authentic truth. And if there is any misunderstanding, always ask for clarification. I'm hearing you say this. Is this what you mean? Because oftentimes we assume we heard because we already listening from our already always knowing what the ego is going to say. So you didn't hear anything except for what you wanted to hear. So being the listening, I would say.
Right, that was beautiful. And that's definitely a good template for people to use. So thanks for giving, that template for people to use in their relationships. And again, be them romantic, business, listen to others. Try not to answer the question before you think you know what the question is.
Absolutely.
All things we all need to continuously work on. And you get to work on that when you are being present.
Absolutely.
So now I want to transition to some of the other questions we have. And the first one is, if you can speak to anybody, dead or alive, who would that be?
I would say Confucius.
Okay. So you're very much into the Asian, the Lao Tzu, the Way, the Tao Te Ching. And
Yes.
what about that type of philosophy speaks to you?
I would say the ability to channel my energy within. I grew up in a culture where I understood that salvation came by a mean of someone other than myself.
So what is that culture, just so that we know?
I would say, some the church, Christianity, which I still have a very strong faith, but I was always told to wait on God for something. And it kind of somewhat at some point clashed for me, when why would I wait on God to do for me what I can do for myself? I don't need to wait on God to open my refrigerator and make a nice omelet sandwich, right? I can get up with that egg and do what I need to do, right? So that's that for me. And for a very long time, I was waiting on God for that omelet. And when he didn't show up, I was resentful. I was angry. I was bitter. And not only at him, but all those other people he made similar to him that lived around me. I realized that God had given us everything that we need. The sun he called one time, and it's still here. And so I just think the misconception of how the biblical terms are interpreted really kind of did not resonate with me. And I didn't know why. I didn't know how. And it wasn't until I started doing some interpersonal work that I realized my frustration came from knowing that there was something different about how I view life, but I kind of shun it because I wanted to be with the majority.
And then as you started to transition into more of the Asian philosophies, what about those Asian philosophies really, caught your soul, your mind?
I would say the ability to, so we've always believed having loud music, singing, dancing to the Lord, and never really quiet. Like as a kid, I was one that wanted solitude. In solitude, I heard things, I witnessed things, I saw things, but my culture was totally different from that. And so there was friction, and I would go to my church and then come back worse off than when I left. And so I think it's the, I would say the serenity, the calmness, the inner work, the ability to be silent, to look within, and to access my own, to bring God home from me, to just be able to channel my energy from within and bring my God from within me home.
Hopefully one day your energy will match up with Confucius's energy and you can have that conversation.
I shall.
So aside from the Tao Te Ching, what are some of the, let's say, the top 3 resources that have inspired you?
I would say practicing the power of now
So
by
Eckhart
Eckhart
Tolle.
Tolle.
Mm-hmm.
I would say the Kabbalion is a great book for me. And of course, I think Tao Te Ching, yeah, those are the 3 I would listen to them over 20, 30 times.
And I've listened to Eckhart Tolle, but I'm one of those that I listen to him and I just want to fall on my face because his voice is just so,
Calm.
But the message I completely understand, and that was one of the first books that I came across when I began to plant the seeds of my mindfulness and my being where my feet are. So I do have to at least give Eckhart Tolle some props for, even though I fell asleep a lot of the time listening to the book, the message still resonated.
Certainly, certainly. He's very unique, very peculiar.
If you could go back and speak to your 18-year-old mother, what would you tell her?
I would say to my 18-year-old mom that she can make it, that outside of everyone else, there is no world, that she is the sum total of everything there is and there will ever need to be.
And why would you give her this message?
Because similar to me, we grow up and people hurt us because we have a codependency on other people. And my mom was the only girl, and she had all brothers, and they were very insensitive towards her, and they were really mean to her. And I can tell that that really bothered her. That would not be me today. That just would not be me. So I would suggest, that that would be what I give her to overcome, that they're only speaking from their own hurt place, and to accept their agreement would mean to validate what they feel. And so that outside of her, how she feels, none of their opinion, nothing that they have to say means anything.
So last question of the episode is, are there any questions you would like to ask me?
I would also like to ask you, other than the books that I mentioned, what is one material you would say that really helped to elevate you or transcend your mind from where you were to where you are now?
Let's see. Let me look at my bookcase over here. The thing is, I listen to a lot of podcasts. So that's
Okay.
where I say I think I would have most of my resources. As I think back, there's podcasts like the Tim Ferriss podcast. There's podcasts like Joe Rogan's, There's podcasts like Paul Chek. I don't know if you've heard of Paul Chek. Paul Chek is where I got my holistic life coaching certification from. You know, he's very much on the frontier of all these things. Part of the reason why I think he's kind of influential to me is that I don't necessarily like him all the time. But
that's nice.
I respect that he is trying to do inner work and that he is human like all of us, and that he's willing to admit all of that. And, you know, sometimes when I hear him, it comes across like and I get this too, and I don't know, maybe you get it, but like, oh, you're a know-it-all. And it's like, if I had a conversation with him, he would say, I don't know it all. That's why. That's why I need to be this way. So because there's so much I don't know that I need to get moving on just trying to figure out as much as possible. One of like the question that I asked you about who I would speak to, dead or alive, for me, it would be like Leonardo da Vinci. To me, just personifies somebody who was able to expand his knowledge on whatever it is he wanted to, because I think when I read his work, he just had such a good understanding and grasp of first principles.
Yes.
And when you can understand first principles, you realize how much of those principles are the foundation for other things that you want to learn. Wow. So those have been some of the resources that I keep going back to.
Last question for you. What gives you pulse to wake up and do this podcast?
Well, meeting people like you, right? Interacting, listening to other people's ideas, other people's point of views and perspectives where I may not necessarily agree, but I get to listen and be like, oh, well, there is this other perspective out in the world. And, you know, I'm glad that I know that it exists now. At the end of the day, I just want to make the world a better place. And I think sitting down and talking is what we always have to do. And one of the quotes I give, not quote, but one of the examples I give is, if we don't respect our First Amendment of speech and being able to speak to each other, the Second Amendment becomes the default. I'd much rather sit down and discuss and figure things out than do things with force.
Sure.
Because I'd rather flow.
Very good.
Yeah, thank you very much for those questions. But now, please tell everybody where they can find all the projects you're working on. So be detailed. Let them know where they can find you.
Well, they can find me on Facebook at milordchantale.com, as well as LinkedIn. My YouTube channel will be coming up soon. Hope to share more, but mostly Facebook right now is where.
And it's under Chantale Milord.
Yes, Chantale Milord.
All right. We'll make sure we spell that correctly and all that so that people can make sure they find you. And for everybody, if you like this episode, please like, share, and rate it. If you feel that this message resonated with you, you can find this and past episodes of WEYT on YouTube at WEYT Show, Facebook, WEYT, and remember WEYT is spelled WEYT. Instagram is also WEYT Show. And with that, I'd like to close it with what I say every time. That is, time and attention is the greatest gift we can give to each other. So until next time, let's spread more peace, love, and smiles. Look at that.